Oh, we'll, 5 minute break turned into a 12 minute, 14 minute break, but we're back, from break and we're going to be signing up a 706. And that's our neonatal bill and, Michael's gonna run through amendments that we asked him to, put together for us, I don't know, yesterday or the day before, so. Welcome, Michael, and glad to have you with us.
Is that online, just so I'm aware?
I have not got it online yet, so
Okay.
I'll display it.
All right, sure. So you should have in front of you, an amendment to H706 that says draft number 2.1 with a 418 date stamp and an 845 AM time stamp. I should have asked the committee and the chair yesterday if you wanted this as a strike call. I did not do it as a full strike call of the bill, and I will go after I run through these with you and draft it as a strike call. But just to review what the amendments are that you requested and that are in the draft in front of you today. In the first instance of amendment, this is unchanged from what you saw yesterday. It removes the term turf from the definition of environmental emergency, and it removes the definition of the term from the definition section, because as you discussed yesterday, you're no longer going to have the prohibition of the neonicotinoid application apply to application of turf. So then you move into the second instance of amendment, and this amends two sections in the bill. It amends the section of the bill related to the prohibition on treated artificial seed, and then it amends section 4 of the prohibition of the bill related to application of neonicotinoid pesticides in general. And so in the main change in section 3 is how the exemption order is issued and the standard for that exemption order. Yesterday, you were looking at what had been passed by the House and how it was very different from New York. And it had standards or criteria that might have been difficult for the agency to meet. So you requested that the exemption order mirror to the best that it could the exemption or criteria for New York. And so you can see that criteria on page 2. The person seeking the exemption order shall complete an integrated pest management training. And that can be provided by the secretary, or it could be by an approved third party. So the secretary may not need to hire new staff. The secretary might just need to approve someone to do the training, and then the person does that training. And then the second criteria, the person seeking the exemption order shall complete a pest risk assessment and submit a pest risk assessment report to the secretary. I looked online to see how common it is to do these pest risk assessments, and online they're called pest risk analysis, and there are tools for doing it, and it is part of generally integrated pest management. So I don't think it will be difficult for the agency to find a tool or an organization or a seed dealer that will be able to do a pest risk assessment that's sufficient for the purpose of the
That's
exemption.
a pretty
For
standard.
what I could see. And then any seeds authorized for use under the exemption order shall be planted only on the property or properties identified in the pest risk assessment report. And the person seeking the exemption order shall maintain the current records of the assessment report and where and when the treated seeds are planted. So it's no longer, there's no longer an evaluation of the effect on pollinators and whether or not there's going to be a significant effect, etc. You do the pest risk assessment, but it's necessary. You do integrated pest management training, so you're not going immediately to the use of the pesticide or the need for the pesticide. And then you keep records on where and how you apply. But to address the issue of the effects on pollinators, the secretary does on page 2, line 18, have the ability to establish restrictions related to the use of the neonicotinoid treated artificial seed to which the exemption order applies. So it's not a mandate that they evaluate the effects on pollinators, but they can put conditions on the use of the treated article seed that would protect pollinators. Then going back up on that page, just to be clear, the order is only valid for 1 year, page 2, line 14. The order specifies the type of treated article seeds to which the order applies, the date which the exemption order takes effect, and the exemption order's duration. And that's fairly unchanged. I did move some pieces around, but those two criteria are the same as what you saw yesterday.
That's similar to.
It is similar to New York, yes.
Yeah, I just want to be clear, once the year is up, can the farmer
Yes,
ask again?
yes. So there is no prohibition or restriction on how many times you ask for it.
It's an annual deal, it's not 2 year, 3 year.
You still have to meet all the criteria.
Yeah.
You do your training, you do your assessment report, so an assessment report, probably gonna be the big aspect of looking for a renewal.
But agronomists will do that.
Upon issuing the exemption order, there was that language about how the General Assembly would manage it like a report, et cetera, et cetera. Instead, it just says on page 3, line 11 and 12, the General Assembly posts the exemption order to the website of the General Assembly. There's no changes from yesterday on lines 13 to 18. And then you go into section 4, and it's very similar to what we just walked through in section 3. It changes how the exemption order is applied. So let's first talk about what section 4 applies to. Section 4 applies to the outdoor application of neonicotinoid pesticides. So it is banning them during crop bloom. It is banning their application to soybeans or any crop in the cereal grains group. It is banning hold on a second. Their application to leafy vegetables, brassica, bulb vegetables, herbs and spices, the stalk, stem, and leaf vegetable crops. You asked what those were. I have the crop group listings here, if you would like them. Each of the reference listings are dog-eared.
Teach my dad here. It's just a whole shelf.
Yes, it's all the crop groups that are listed by USDA. And you'll see the specific ones, cauliflower, celery, that they're all specifically listed under each case. Moving down on that page 4, line 10. There used to be the prohibition on the application to turf. That it's been removed. There's no longer a prohibition from the application of neonicotinoid pesticides to turf. And then you get to the renew of the new exemption order process. It still is if the secretary determines that there's an environmental emergency for agriculture. That is still the same and consistent with New York. No, except that New York kind of combines environmental and agricultural. And so Vermont has kind of bifurcated them, separated them, but it's the same basic criteria. Then the pesticide would be effective in addressing the environmental emergency or the ag emergency, and no other less harmful pesticide or pest management practice will be effective in addressing the emergency. So it's no longer, again, that evaluation of the effect on the pollinators and whether or not the agency could actually do what was required in the House passed bill. And it is the secretary determining all of these things. The secretary determines whether there's a valid emergency. Secretary determines whether the pesticide that's being applied for will be effective, and whether no less harmful pesticide or pest management practices will be effective. So it is not. It is something that is vested in the secretary's authority. Page 5, written exemption orders. valid for a year, can specify the neonic pesticides used, where they're gonna be used, the date, and the duration, et cetera. And then on page 5, line 8, 9, provide a detailed evaluation determining that an ag or environmental emergency exists. As with the exemption order for treated seed, the secretary may establish restrictions related to the use that would minimize harm to pollinator populations, and may establish other restrictions related to the use of a pesticide. Again, on page 6, that language about.
Go back. I'm sorry, Mike. So, line 4 on that page 5, perf is still in there. I don't know whether,
It should be removed. And then page 6, upon issuing the order, the order sent to the General Assembly and the General Assembly posted to its website, no longer that language about how to manage it. And then you get to the contingencies, which you asked for yesterday. So what if prior to these provisions going into effect, New York repeals their prohibition? So that's what section 8 does. It says section 6 VSA 1105B, the prohibition on neonicotinoid treated article seeds is repealed if the prohibition on the use of neonicotinoid treated article seed in New York is repealed. So it goes away if New York's goes away. Same with the application, and here's an important point. New York only has a ban on neonicotinoid outdoor use on ornamental plants. It doesn't have that ban on crops in bloom. It doesn't have the ban on leafy vegetables. It doesn't have the ban on soy and cereal. It just has a ban on ornamental plants and turf. So if they repeal that, do you want that to repeal all of the outdoor application in Vermont? This is what page 6, lines 15 to 18 does that.
I would think.
in other words, we'd be in sync with New York.
You would no longer have an outdoor application ban, just like they would no longer have an outdoor application ban.
Yeah, I think,
I think that's the key, right? Trying to,
I mean, they're
line
trying
things
to
up.
follow along and be consistent.
So just because my little practical mind. Well, for me, I'm most concerned about is that our farmers who are trying to get seed. And we've heard that if they're trying to buy from a seed dealer, that we might not be able to get seed if we're so far out in front of a bigger place like New York. So what this would say is my seed dealers, that the ban would be off if New York did. Because I'm most concerned about, for me, the seed dealers.
Yeah. So you have, the contingent effective date is really, and that's on page 7. And subsections B and C. And for the seed, it's subsection C. And like the Vermont ban will not go into effect unless the New York ban is in effect.
Okay,
Okay, so if the New York ban is repealed, then the Vermont ban doesn't even go into effect.
so this gets it to, I only ask in that respect because they just moved the ban from 27 to
Right.
29.
Right.
So if they again push something off a year, we would track it.
Okay, you raised an important point with regard to the language, because it says with the contingency is not repealed. It should say is not in effect or is not. Should we tweak that language?
So we want to track.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
want,
They go to 2035, we go to 2035.
yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
that's what we're
that
talking
was our
Yeah.
intent.
Yeah, because we don't
Right.
want our seed dealers
got it.
not be with
Yeah, no,
90,000
that's what we were
acres.
talking about, yeah.
You know, because I'll tell you, I mean, doing 90,000 acres compared to 1 million. New York's the only one that's gonna drive those seed companies to
Right.
do untreated
Right.
or dynamite seed. Cause they got 1 million acres there.
Yeah,
And
right.
So we should be able to
No, I like the tracking, yeah.
track along with them and make sure our people have seeds available, either one kind or another, because they'll be driving the bus and producing them in New York.
Yep.
And they'll just throw a few more bags in for us.
That's about right.
So you want me to go draft it as a strike?
Are we all good?
I don't like the
You
twenty
work
thirty-one
that.
date, because if we're gonna track New York, I think we should make New York date 2029.
Well, don't worry, we'll probably get there.
Oh, wait, which date don't you like?
The final date, if we're gonna track New York all along, I would like to see us have the same 2029 date as New York. Because if the seed companies are gonna rev up for 2029 for New York, then they're revving up for us. I mean, it's sort
You haven't bought a lot of cars, have you? You
Buy
gotta
used car.
learn to dicker. There'll be some serious dicking. Dicking.
I don't doubt that, but anyway, I don't like that we're withdrawing our laws if New York withdraws their laws, and I would also posit that because seeds are being produced from Quebec, and we have something on our website where the Louis Robert sent us a list of all the Quebec seeds, treated and untreated, that are now available in the market. So I think that we would be able to, if this were in fact tomorrow, find the seeds that we needed from Quebec. Which sounds like we're unwilling to do, but I don't think there's a shortage now of seeds on the market to do untreated, and I certainly don't know that we need to push it out.
I would just say to that, we don't control what can go back and forth across the international border. And, there's lots of animals and lots of seed that the US government controls, so we can't, Quebec becomes a different, and they sell different seeds there. New York, because of the interstate commerce law, we is in the states around us, are all in a different place with that. If I thought we could buy from across the border uninhibited, it would be one thing, but it's not. So I'm just worried that if a bigger state like New York moves stuff out again, because they just moved it out, what do we do? What do our little farmers do?
Can we just make our effective date consistent with New York's, and that way we're not naming a year certain, we're saying whenever New York's goes into effect, ours goes into effect, so that we really are tracking, because I'm seeing like a half page or more, almost a whole page worth of things right now that track New York, but we're not tracking the date. So I'm just kind of curious.
Well, just,
I used to track big trucking companies for 3 years before I would go buy the new stuff that the dealers were trying to sell me. And I'll tell you, I saved myself hundreds of thousands of dollars with wheels not falling off and all that stuff. If you're dealing with something serious, that affects your livelihood, you wanna let somebody else be the guinea pig and track along behind them a bit, and I guess they're all bought and sold on this stuff's gonna be the best thing, and we're gonna have bumblebees on the shallower or narrower parts of the lake coming right over here, because they can fly a mile, so we oughta, that year that we're gonna give them,
2 years. Is it 2 years, right?
I wouldn't think
Okay,
that the farm on too. but,
Well, for what it's worth, I'm not an early adopter either of any technology. I just understand that Quebec and Ontario have a track record and the Cornell professor went through that at length. So this is, and the European Union, which we're not gonna buy seeds from them either, but there is scientific data about the yield and things that to me says we're not the kind of early adopter that I might be if I were buying an EV that was brand new. But-
so,
Thanks.
thank you, Mike.
I'll be back.
Yeah,
So we're just gonna wait for the new draft.
well, we got,
Main witnesses.
we got,
No, no, good. I got the governor at noon, but
You do?
I'll stay.
I think he wants me at 11:45. Probably ready for the meeting.
Mine's a legitimate meeting that we have every week.
so good morning, Sylvia.
Good morning, Senator Starr and Agricultural Committee. Thank you for this time. I live downstream of golf courses and I drink Burlington's water from Lake Champlain. I'm also a member of the Jubilee Social Justice Committee of the Cathedral Church of St. Paul in Burlington. And our diocese, the Episcopal Diocese of Vermont, passed a resolution last November urging institutions in the diocese to go pesticide free. So there's a fair amount of concern in the Episcopal Diocese that people all around Vermont about the use of pesticides, about the fact that over 1 million active ingredients of pesticides, that's just active ingredients, are used every year. That's a great concern. I have supported the passage of H706, but I'm extremely concerned by what I'm hearing from Michael O'Grady this morning about amendments to weaken this bill considerably and to push it off. I think we need to think about our relationship with bees and the plants that they pollinate, and the fact that, they are in danger now, not 5 years from now. They're in danger now. So, I want to ask you to please oppose exemptions for neonics for golf courses in H706. They are toxic, we know, to pollinators, birds, bats, soil organisms, aquatic invertebrates, and they're mobile and persistent in water. They're endocrine disruptors and can do harm at tiny amounts to all of life. I want you to think about that. 2 neonics, clothianidin and imidacloprid, are included in Agency of Agriculture's list of pesticides approved for golf courses. And I would urge the agency to remove those neonics from those lists. And I'll tell you why. I want to thank the agency's contact on golf courses, David Huber, for providing me with information about golf course permits, the pesticides, and the use of reports from several golf courses. Let's shift gears a minute. In 2021, that was a dry year. Between June and October, the U.S. Geological Services tested a wide range of contaminants, including 2 neonics, at 5 monitoring stations along Lake Champlain. west, Burlington's coast of Lake Champlain. 4 streams and the Burlington wastewater treatment facility. Again, reminder that was a dry year. I'm going to skip over my part about clothianidin for the moment. I want to talk about imidacloprid. The EPA guideline for imidacloprid in water is 1.05 parts per billion to protect aquatic invertebrates. Aquatic invertebrates are the base of the aquatic ecosystem and the other creatures that depend on life in the aquatic system. Imidacloprid was detected in Potash Brook at 60 parts per billion in June, at 8.9, almost 9 parts per billion in July, and 13 parts per billion in August. Those are significant numbers. In Inglesby Brook, it was detected at 2.6 parts per billion. Remember, compared to 1.05 parts per billion for aquatic, as a guideline for aquatic organisms. Now, in the effluent from the Burlington wastewater treatment facility, imidacloprid was found at 101 parts per billion in August. And it was found at 35 parts per billion in October. So evidently, wastewater treatment facilities cannot filter out pesticides. This is a warning to us all. Where is all this imidacloprid coming from?
You're gonna,
Now, yeah, you have a question?
yeah, well, no, but we're running out of 10 minutes here, so.
Okay,
Gonna
I
have to.
just want to say that the golf courses are using very little, if any, neonics. I waited for an hour to come on, so I'm not the only one holding this up. The golf courses use very little neonics. The main insecticide they're using now is chlorantraniliprole. So they don't need neonics. They do not need an exemption to the neonics. Please do not remove turf from the legislation. They're using newer pesticides now. They do not need to use neonics. That's my main point.
Yeah,
They're getting in the water when they are used. The buffers are not protecting the water. The buffers for the Burlington, golf courses, period, is only 25 feet from flowing water. And that's not protecting anything. So they don't need to use neonics. Please do not exempt turf from the law. And I'll close my comments at that point. Thank you.
well, appreciate that, Sylvia, and, thank you. Any questions?
I just wondered, was that year 2021 that you were referring to? With all
That's when USGS did their testing.
Great, thanks.
I
Thank
can
you.
get some information to you if you need it.
Terrence, are you on?
I am, yep.
Well, sorry to hold you folks up, but we had another subject that took us an hour longer than we thought.
I was following a bit of that. Our tractor fleet has everything from a 1948 Alice Chalmers G to a 2022 Kubota. And I'll tell you, you know which one's easier to fix.
Yeah, the old one.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to, if I can share my screen, I got a few slides I'm going to pop up here. I think I need to have that enabled.
Yeah, we got, I don't know, 10 minutes or so. 'Cause
That's plenty. Plenty for me. Yep.
Yeah.
Here we go. All right. So I just want to start off with this to say I've been following the neonic story, I guess, for a while. I was the chair of the pollinator committee back then in 2017, 16, 17, 18, somewhere in there. But also my job is as part of my job is as the extension tree fruit IPM specialist for apple and grape producers. And I've been following the discussion, and I've seen both once in the Senate discussion and once or twice in the House discussion about the apple growers kind of getting a free ride. So I wanted to, in terms of them not being held to the bill. So I just wanted to give a little discussion about how we use and promote integrated pest management in Vermont orchards. One thing I want to highlight is the value and the importance of orchards of apples to the Vermont agricultural economy. The main thing to look at on this slide is the $18.5 million, or roughly 30 if you add cider production into to the Vermont economy. We are the second most valuable specialty crop after maple, even though right now we're only growing on about 1,500 acres, down from almost 3,000 20 years ago, for lots of reasons. But the main thing is the value of this particular crop. So my job in the fruit program, I provide extension outreach. I've been doing research. I've been working in this industry since 1995. I was a commercial grower for 3 years. I was the president of Vermont Tree Fruit Growers Association for 6 or 7 years, and now I'm a professor and department chair at UVM. I know this industry well. I collaborate with growers. I still manage our horticulture center and was actually on the sprayer Monday morning, starting the season. So I'm the one who actually gets out there and does this, and also consults with growers about this. So this is some of the work that we do. We're the main people. We're the people that growers ask for advice. I published just this morning. I sent out published a bulletin to my growers based upon the season as it's happening, because we're now actively in the season. A lot of what I discuss is integrated pest management, and IPM is kind of foundational in terms of how we grow our fruit. IPM as a concept started in the 1960s. In the apple industry in the Northeast, starting initially in Nova Scotia and then in Massachusetts and New England, and has kind of spread, to now be conventional apple growing is IPM. Some of the discussion around treated seeds, one of the pieces that's held out there is it doesn't follow IPM because you're putting the chemical on before you follow all the other practices. You can debate whether that's true or not. Depending on where in the IPM spectrum, it falls, that tactic falls. But with apple growers, we have a very mature IPM system that follows all the basic tenets of that. One of the key pieces that we have, I am the coordinator of the NEWA system, the Network for Environment and Weather Applications, which is for Vermont, which is a statewide weather station network that ties weather stations to models, so that growers can know up to the minute whether or not they have an apple scab infection, whether or not cowling moth are flying, what cycle they're in, what generation they're in, whether or not they're susceptible to certain, pesticides or other tactics you might use. And this is what we dreamed of 30 years ago when IPM involved me with a clipboard writing down, temperature readings and manually converting to degree days and mailing notices to growers. This has really made things much more advanced in terms of how we manage pests. We can take all these different models. These weather stations are all over the state, and output right where the pest pressure or particular spot in the pest and the plant cycle is, and to really optimize how we're managing pests. The other thing we do is we run a scouting program. On the right is is a video I just posted yesterday, recorded and posted yesterday. We started our scouting season. So we teach growers how to scout for the insects, how to monitor for the insects, as well as diseases, and then apply IPM to really not just minimize, but I would say optimize how pesticides are used in orchards. There's a whole host. If you look at the NRA's guide on diseases and pests in the Northeast, there's about 80 or so diseases, 80 or so insects, but really there's about half a dozen of each that are of major importance that if you don't manage every single year in every single orchard, will lead to potentially complete crop loss. So the main out in the Northeast where it's wet, apple scab kind of drives our management, but we also, while we're spraying for scab, are often managing for insects. And you can see a whole host of insects here. This one down here, we're going to hear about a little bit later, apple maggot. If you've got an apple maggot infestation or a codling moth infestation, you could potentially have a complete crop loss. I did about 15 years of research on organic apple production and still maintain a small plot of organic fruit. And we have damage sometimes as high as 60% of complete crop loss by not having modern tools to use to manage some of our pests.
Yes.
This is a calendar of the season. You can see kind of the phenology of how the plant moves through the season up until the fruit's set and then grow for the rest of the summer. And you can see that throughout the year, there's something that needs to be managed one way or another. I want to talk specifically now here about how we manage insects and specifically how we use neonics. I don't hide from that. Neonics are part of orchard management. You look at this IRAC code here, 4A is the code for neonics. And you can see from petal fall, which is going to happen about a month from now when the blossoms fall off, through kind of maybe early mid-June, there's a whole group of insects that are active. And there's a number of different materials that are not just 4A materials that are effective against a number of different pests. And so we use multiple materials intentionally in rotation so that we minimize or even try to eliminate insecticide resistance. So the insects can become resistant to particular materials if you use them over and over and over again. And you can see that none of these materials is great against everything, right? In fact, the ones that are more highly effective against more classes of insects are these 1B materials, which are the organophosphates, which we've been phasing out for 30 years because they have high toxicity to humans. If I sprayed Imidan in an orchard, in a pick your own orchard, I have to wait 14 days before I'm able to allow customers into that orchard because it causes harm, and I don't hide that. Whereas the neonics have a relatively low mammalian toxicity. They have a high safety profile. In the summer, this is the big one to look at. Apple maggot that I mentioned before. You see, there's only a couple of highly effective materials, and they are neonics, Actara, Asail, which is acetamiprid, which has, and I'll talk about that one in a second. The other one that's highly effective is this organophosphate, which has that 14-day reentry interval, and is something we've been trying to move away from for the last 30 years. There's some other ones, codling moth, the neonics have some use, some of them are highly effective, but there's a lot of other materials that are effective against codling moth. So I'd say that apple maggot is the primary pest that we're targeting toward neonics towards, and acetamiprid is the main one of them, this Asail SG. So generally speaking, in our production system, we've got most of our orchards in the valleys, the Champlain and Connecticut valleys. We're producing fairly high production, some of the highest per acre production in New England. We have orchards that have been in business for decades. And it used to be that you sprayed 8 to 12 fungicides, 3 to 6 insecticides a year. But in the last 10 or 15 years, since we've implemented NEWA, since we've gotten more optimized with the materials that are available, including neonics, we've cut those sprays down by a third to a half. And this is even in the biggest orchards that have a very low tolerance for pest damage. So I just got a few more to cover here. In 2017, we did a survey of growers, and the things to look at, I guess this next page is the important thing to do. I asked our growers what they do to reduce impacts on pollinators in the orchard. Everybody doesn't spray during bloom. That's just a hard and fast rule that we have. It's against the law to spray insecticides during bloom. So all of our growers reported this. 2/3 of them reported not even using neonics. What else I want to show here? Lots of our growers maintain flowering habitat on the farm so that we actually have refugia for pollinators. One of the other ones I would say, this is the one that I found surprising. Half of the growers surveyed reported that they rely upon wild bees for pollination. So we are unique in that we are both spraying, potentially be harmful to bee insecticides, and yet also highly reliant upon the pollinators. So we really have to do the best job that we can to manage this. I did a quick survey in December, knowing that some of this discussion was going to be coming up during the season to get a sense for what growers are doing now in the field. They all report being IPM growers. That's no surprise. Most of them report maintaining wild pollinator habitat on their farms. That's no surprise because we are dependent upon them. But this is what I thought was interesting. This is just strictly a Likert scale where I said, what do you think the general pollination conditions on your farm have been in the last 5 years? And this is the window that we've been hearing, more and more loss of certain insects. And 1 to 10, 10 being excellent, and no one said less than 5, and the average was almost 8. So growers are reporting, high, very good pollination conditions on the farm. I asked them about diversity and abundance of wild bees. They're reporting, high levels of diversity and abundance of wild bees on their farm. And I asked them about their perception of pollinator health, and the worst they said was 6 people said it decreased a little bit. No one is seeing a major collapse of bees on their commercial orchards, and these are the orchards that are out there spraying. Most of them likely applying at least a neonic in July against apple maggot, as well as other insecticides. The other thing I asked them was, what do they do? Are they part of the team to be protecting the pollinators? And this doesn't surprise me because we, as an industry, and myself professionally in extension, have been promoting pollinator health. So they gave themselves an 8.5 in terms of the effort that they apply to protect bees on their farm. And then their knowledge, there was one person who still didn't feel very knowledgeable, but in general, most people felt very knowledgeable about the best practices to manage bees on their farm. The last thing I'm going to end with is this report has been used throughout this discussion. This is the report from New York State by some very valuable and accomplished entomologists. And there are chapters in there or sections in there that reference fruit. And they have a very different conclusion around the fruit compared to the field crops. So I just want to reference these charts. We won't. They're kind of busy a little bit, but the general gist of it is the comparison of multiple different studies looking at whether or not a foliar neonic versus other insecticides or other controls found a positive benefit either to yield or crop quality or a negative benefit. And overwhelmingly, they were seeing positive benefit or no significant difference, but substantial positive benefit, which is kind of the opposite of what they were seeing with field crops. Similar, I don't like this one. This is the general piece that they came up that I just pulled from the text, that if they saw inconsistent benefits, they saw much more consistent benefits of the use of neonics in fruit crops, with 75% of the cases showing that they were provided a benefit to crop protection and both quantity and quality of the fruit. The other thing that's important to note is I mentioned acetamiprid. That is the primary neonic that is used in orchards. And acetamiprid is of the class of neonics that's about tenfold less harmful to bees, to honeybees in particular. And their conclusion at the end of this last sentence here is that the risk in orchards was always lower than it was in other crops, than it was compared to using imidacloprid and thiamethoxam. The way that they're used, the advanced level of IPM that growers use, really does give a reason, I think, or explains the reason why orchards have been sort of set aside as unique compared to how neonics are used in other crops. And I'll just end there.
Questions
All
for Terry?
So thank you very much.
Thanks,
Thanks, Sharon.
appreciate it.
Yeah,
Excellent. Thank you.
yeah.
Good overview. Thank you.
Well, we have Michael back with us, I don't know if we still got 2 or 3 minutes.
These two, my, here, these are on the mountain, my, here.
Michael, have you got any free time?
I have until 1 o'clock.
So Emily, are you on? Yeah, and I don't know, Mike, if we're gonna get to you or not, because we have our councilman here that we need to deal with, very shortly, but we'll get Emily, 5-10 minutes, Emily. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I'm going to try and share my screen here real quick. All right. Hopefully I'll be able to do this. Can you see my slides?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'm going to just start up front with my summary, most of which you already know. So neonics are highly toxic at very small doses to bees, soil and aquatic life, and birds. And sorry, I should have started with who I am. I'm Emily May. I'm a pollinator conservation biologist with the Xerces Society for Invertebrate Conservation. Xerces works with farmers in Vermont and around the country on pollinator conservation and other beneficial invertebrate conservation. I'm based in Vermont, currently traveling, wish I could be there with you today. So, all right, the harms are clear. And I'm going to give a couple of examples. And then I submitted to the House a follow-up based on some of the conversation we had there about comparison of the toxicity to bees of neonic seed treatments compared to some of the replacement options for seed corn maggot and wireworms. And you can find that in the House witness documents, but neonic seed treatments are 2.5 to 29 times more toxic to bees than those replacement options, including the diamide seed treatments and other available options. Seed treatment neonics are the largest contributor to insecticide use in the state of Vermont, but are used with little evidence of pest pressure or yield benefits. And I'm also going to talk a little bit about turf uses, since you're talking about that as well. I wanted to start just with something that I talked about in the House, which is that the pounds applied is not the same as risk to bees, right? So it's critical to understand that a highly toxic pesticide applied at a low rate can be more risky than a less toxic pesticide applied at a high rate, because pesticides differ by orders of magnitude in how toxic they are to bees. So you can't say that something going on at 2 ounces an acre is going to be less risky than something going on at 10 pounds an acre if that first thing is 1,000 times more toxic. For neonics, the amount that it takes to kill a bee is just so vanishingly small. So you heard from other testifiers that an acceptable amount of dust off from a 50-pound bag of seed is about 1 gram, which is the same weight as maybe a paper clip or a pen cap, which seemed like nothing, but the dose of thiamethoxam or clothianidin that could kill an adult honeybee is 4 billionths of a gram. So 1 gram of either of those active ingredients is enough to kill 125 million bees if they were exposed directly to it, which sounds crazy. I actually had to double check that math about 10 times. it's just really, really hard to convey how toxic these are to bees at the insect scale. The amount that is lethal to a bee is an amount that you can't see with your naked eye. So if you're multiplying that 1 gram, 125 million bees, with the dust off from 400 bags of seed needed to plant 1,000 acres, you can see how that might add up. So this is where I'm just going to skim through a little bit of impacts, because you've already heard this, right? That 90% or more of what's going on in corn seeds ends up not in the crop, but elsewhere in the environment, in the soil and water and plants. And that research on the resulting harms is really clear. So honeybees exposed to neonics during planting have higher mortality and slower growth. Wild bees and honeybees exposed to neonics in pollen over those 3 to 4 months of the summer end up producing fewer offspring. And that's something that actually EPA really doesn't capture in its risk assessment process. So if you're thinking about, taking that ecological impact part out of the exemption process, that's something that's not going to be part of EPA's own risk assessment process, just to be clear on that. And then there's also been a lot of field research on the other bees that live around our fields, provide about 50% of our pollination. The wild bees. So Vermont has about 350 different kinds of wild bees, and some are very economically important pollinators. And then there's field research that's found fewer of those native bees around fields that have higher concentrations of neonics in the soil. So not just a lower abundance of bees, but also fewer species of those native bees living around fields that have more neonics in the soil. I wanted to highlight one study published in Nature showing pretty clearly some of these impacts of seed treatments on wild bees. So they looked at canola fields with and without neonic seed treatments and found 50% fewer wild bees around fields that had the neonic treated seeds. They found reduced nesting by wild bees, so 100% reduction. Mason bees failed to produce brood cells next to seed treated canola fields. And then really critically in terms of population, they found reduced colony growth and reproduction of bumblebees. So bumblebee colonies next to neonic treated seed fields produced 70% fewer new queens, which is really important for how those populations can persist and grow or decline over time. And one thing you've only heard a little bit about is the aquatic impacts, because it's not just about the bees. These products end up in water, as you heard from Sylvia at the beginning of this session. The widespread use of neonics has really broad impacts on aquatic life, and those aquatic food webs are so important to fish and birds. Most Vermonters are bird watchers. Over a third participate in fishing. So if you care about birds and fish, you care about aquatic insects. So higher concentrations of neonics ending up in waterways after the planting of treated seeds have been linked to lower aquatic insect richness and abundance. So that's really important for our food webs. And then I have 2 more slides. This one is that risk analysis that we did comparing neonic seed treatments against other replacement options for seed corn maggots and wireworms. So this was looking at diamide seed treatments, a pyrethroid insecticide applied in the planter box, and then 3 in-furrow insecticides applied to the soil, so things you've heard about. We found that neonic seed treatments introduce the highest risk per acre of all of those alternative seed treatment and in-furrow options. So if a grower is looking for a replacement option, anything that they choose besides the neonic is going to be lower risk to bees. So on average, those neonic seed treatments were 2.5 to 11 times more harmful by contact exposure and 6 to 29 times more harmful than the alternatives for oral exposure, so when a bee ingests it. And that's really due to that incredibly low dose of a neonic that it takes to be lethal to a bee, as well as the persistence of neonics in the environment. And then I'll just end on this slide, which is looking at neonic use in Vermont by source. So this comes from data from the Agency of Ag on pesticide reporting. So seed treatments are actually reported as an estimated range. So this is breaking down use by seed treatments in orange block. This is the low end estimate of their use against the other uses of neonics in our environment. That green bar down in the lower right is the other food crop uses. So Terry, you heard just about the orchard uses. That includes all other food crop uses besides seed treatments. It's a very low percentage of neonic use. And then this is the high end estimate of seed treatment use. And this, I think, is based on the label rate of seed treatments. There's some uncertainty there. But the point here is that neonic seed treatments are the largest single contributor to the use of not just neonics, but all insecticides in the state of Vermont. This upper end estimate of seed treatment use is higher than all other reported insecticide use in the state of Vermont combined for the year 2021, which is about 6,200 pounds total. Just to put that in context. But I did, because you're talking about a proposed blanket exemption for turf, want to point out that from a bee's perspective, that golf course use, as well as all of that other use on turf for lawn care and municipal uses, is still really important for the exposure of bees in our residential communities, as well as around golf courses. So these treatments end up not just in the pollen and nectar of weedy species that are in turf, but also around in planned and intentional pollinator habitat. So thinking about folks who hire a commercial applicator to treat their lawns and manage their lawns, they might have put pollinator stuff in around those lawns, not realizing what's actually being used by that commercial applicator on their lawn. So not knowing that there's a neonic there. And over 80% of Vermonters reported being in favor of phasing out neonics. So I guess what I'm asking is, if golf courses are really the concern, why not keep turf in the bill, knowing that a lot of turf use is not on golf courses, but on residential lawns as well, and have those golf courses follow the same rules to gain access to neonics when there's a verified need? Or maybe there's an exemption specifically for golf courses that have an existing IPM plan in place with the state. So I'll just wrap up there and say, this legislation is really driven by the science on the harms. That science is really clear. And I like that Vermont can be a leader in joining New York on this issue, protecting pollinators and other wildlife and the food systems they support, while ensuring that just transition for farmers. So happy to take questions. I know we're kind of out of time here. Thanks a lot for having me.
Yeah, we're usually a day late and a dollar short. And
My
thank,
shift comes in, I'll be at the airport.
thank you for your testimony. There.
Thank you.
No, great.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Emily.
Thank you. So we're gonna.
This is my phone.
Just a quick question, quick comment about turf. Great, but the golf courses use it, but have a mowing requirement that there needs to be mowed or clover before you use it. Does that make sense? This is my testimony. I just wrote it up. I know we're short of time, and I have some things to say, and
That's
I'm afraid about this. Here, Linda.
Yes.
Hi. Everybody get us, I think Sandra started.
Yes, I got.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Very good. So my name is Michael Palmer. I'm owner and founder of Frank Lake Berries in St. Albans, Vermont. I started keeping bees in 1974, which means that's 51 years. This is my 51st year. Of those 51 years, 42 were commercial beekeeping. I was president of the Vermont Beekeeper Association for 5 years. I did 5 years of a 2-year term. Because nobody else did do it, of course. I had up to 1,000 honey production colonies in the Champlain Valley of Vermont and New York. And I produced 30 to 50 tons of honey annually. I pollinated apples in Chazy, New York for 20 years with 600 colonies, and most of that time was all done by hand work. You can imagine, with no forklifts. I gave up my pollination contract in 2001 because I didn't like what was happening to my bees, moving them into the orchard, moving them out of the orchard, being pesticide killed in the orchard. And piles of dead bees everywhere in the orchard because they sprayed. So I gave up on the pollination. Now I'm focused on production of honey. So I'm not making 30 to 40 tons anymore, or 50. I'm only making 12 this year. But I am running a queen breeding program. I've been running a queen breeding program for the last 25 years. And so those queens, I use those queens or I sell those for cash income. I'm involved in a stock improvement program with the University of Vermont. And we're in about our 4th year of this and starting to see some really nice improvements. I grow 350 nucleus colonies every year for sales and use. What are nucleus colonies? Senator Starr, you know what a heifer is. Of course. And so these nucleus colonies are my heifers. So I create them in the summer and then I use them or sell them next spring for cash in, spring cash or startup that or to replace dead ends. Over the last 50 years, I've developed a honeybee management practice that are now used around the world. In the last 10 years, I spoke to beekeeping groups in many countries, from New Zealand to the United Kingdom, to Ireland, to Canada, to Chile, to Mexico, and of course, all across the United States. My management practices have become so popular in Latin America that my work has been labeled El Method, the method. And there are so many people now that are following my method and just really doing well in their apiary work. And you know what I can say? Can you imagine beekeepers in Latin America, from Mexico to Uruguay and Chile? Respecting me and my work so much, I was really not ready for this. So in the last number of years, problems have arisen in my apiaries. I'm losing high numbers of colonies for unexplained reasons. Our annual colony losses are no longer winter related. My honeybee colonies are now collapsing in the autumn, never making it to winter in a survivable condition. So Senator Starr, I have a question for you. You're a cattleman. Well,
To some degree.
to some degree, and dairy, I guess. Dairy.
Okay.
And how long have you been doing this? Generations, perhaps?
Yeah, about 4.
See, you're a lucky, let me tell you, I'm for first and maybe only, but, you know, you've had, cattle long enough that if you see a cow or something is wrong with an animal, you kind of know there's something wrong with that animal. You know, you may not know what it is. You know there's something wrong with that animal. So what do? You call professional help. It's your veterinarian to come and check it out, and maybe that a veterinarian can diagnose and maybe give you something, help that valuable cow. Well, who am I gonna help? There are no professionals for me to call. None. I am the professional. You know, and I don't know what's going on. I could call the ag agency that they're telling us our bees are healthy and robust, and they're not. They're not. Don't listen to some migratory pollinator that goes to Georgia with 2,000 colonies that's been had bees for 10 years. Please, don't offend me.
Well,
So
they did testify to that.
I realize that's where why I said this. There's some of us have been in this for a lifetime. In 2021, I enrolled in a pollen trapping study with UVM. You know, I'm trying to figure this out. What do you do when you can't figure out what's wrong? You look at your whole operation. You survey your whole operation. What did I do? What did I not do? What have I done before? What do you think what could it possibly be? I don't know. So we started in 2021. I was one of the founders of this pollen trapping study with the University of Vermont Honeybee Laboratory.
Yeah.
And the levels of herbicides, fungicides, insecticides, and neonicotinoids are more concerning. I'm here to speak about neonicotinoids. First, don't get me wrong, please. I am not here to end use of agricultural pesticides. I am not. I'm talking about neonicotinoids. And I realize the need, and agree with the use of some pesticides in our agriculture. You can't plant corn in wet clay soil in Vermont, and this fungicide. Seed would rot. I understand that. You know, look back in the testimony. At the Senate and House Ag Committees in the last years. You know, I was on the Pollinator Protection Committee. Nominated by Governor Shumlin. Same as Terry Bradshaw. You know, we came out with a plan that was for an IPM approach to use of neonicotinoids. This, of course, was denied. But so I've always supported the Vermont farmers' rights to use a product that to save their crops. But the reason I supported this so strongly was because the Vermont Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets told it that they surveyed beehives and they found no neonicotinoids in the pollen in the beehives. Okay, fine. But then I find out that the machinery they use for sampling, for testing, is only good down to 10 parts per billion. So traditionally, I'm used to losing 10 to 15% of my honeybees. That's in the traditional. Okay. 2014, 15, I lost 2%. 2015, 16, I lost 6%. 2016, 17, I lost 40%. And it's continued to increase until 2023, I lost 60% of my honey production colonies. Why? I don't know. So what a devastating loss for my group. No, I have to replace them. So all those heifers, those honeybee heifers that I use for spring sale. So I have money to pay my bills in the spring. You know what farming is like. You have all these bills come due in the spring. I had nothing. I had to use those bees. I could not sell. I had 100 of them sold, and I had to cancel all that. So you talk about a devastating effect. What I would like to know what agriculture industry with livestock or anything else could lose 30% of their livestock or their apple trees every year, and it's getting worse and worse and worse. We're doing the best we can. You know, I've been battling varroa mites for the last 35 years. Okay, don't you think I know now how to battle varroa mites? Of course, it's one of the main problems in my apiary, and we have to tackle this spring, summer, and fall, and we do. So once the pollen results came back from Cornell University, possible reason for these high colony losses came to light. In one apiary, I call it my Decker yard. Okay, this is one of the most important apiary I have. This is where I raise all my queens. I raise 1,100, 1,200 queens a year. I use half of them. I sell half of them. There was high levels, enormous levels of clothianidin in that draft pollen. You know, realize that the pollen, that the cornfields around that apiary have been cornfields for the last 20 years, never rotated, never, not once. So every year, clothianidin is added to that soil. The levels must be huge. I reminded Randy Brock, Senator Brock, that these cornfields are in his backyard. That piqued his interest immediately. You know, I bet. So what are the clothianidin levels in a honeybee that's damaging? 1 part per billion, as was said, 1.09 or something, it leads to measurable damage of honeybee colonies. At 5 parts per billion, nearly half the queens are lost. Can you imagine if half my queens are lost? What am I going to do? Okay, so the level of the clothianidin in the Decker, 10.75 parts per billion. When 1 part per billion is damaging and 5 parts per billion, I lose half my queens. Here's 10.75 parts per billion. Imagine what that's doing to my honeybees and to my queen rearing process. You know? Now, these levels were the pollen was trapped in May. Okay. There's no corn pollen in May, is there? No. The plants are up this high, maybe There's no corn from home. So where is all this, clothianidin coming from? Well, when the seed is planted, it's lubricated with talc. And that talc contains levels of clothianidin. And when they plant the seeds, the dust goes around the fields. And so all the pollinating plants around those fields are contaminated with clothianidin. It's moving through the soil. Okay, so now what about the dandelions? Dandelions didn't come from treated seeds.
And
We're seeing 5 parts per billion in dandelion pollen.
we're running out.
I realize, I'm done. You've got what I wrote here.
Yeah. we
You
got
know,
that.
Please watch the YouTube from the French farmers if you haven't yet. So all I'm asking for is some help. You know, I need help. Where am I gonna get that? I don't know what to do. I'm 75 years old. I could have quit 10 years ago. You know,
Well,
and I can't do it. It's my life. And my bees are dying and I don't know what to do.
hopefully, hopefully the bill will help you.
I hope if it passes, please. No, please. That's all I'm asking for is help.
Sorry to rush you, but,
I know,
we're,
but you've got the rest of my state.
yeah, we.
You know,
And a book full of other. Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you for your time and for
you're welcome.
coming down, appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thanks, Michael.
Mhm.
Michael?
Can you send me an electronic? Just send me the document.
It's in Word. I
That's
can
fine.
probably send it. You want it out here, you know?
I just need that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, now, we had a coup.
So there's one there for Linda.
Oh, we got the findings back. Okay.
But so we're moving from the instance by instance, which you looked at earlier, to a full strike all. And I won't walk through all of the language.
Yeah.
I do want to point out something in the findings section. The findings on page 3, line 20 and 21 did reference that New York had banned the application to turf. I don't know if you want to keep that or not, considering that you're removing
What
turf.
page?
Page 3,
It's 3-5 of it.
line 20 and 21. So that's a question for you, if you want to keep reference to turf in the bill or not.
I didn't think we were going to.
Okay. All right. And then on page 5, in the definition of environmental emergency, you remove the reference to turf after agricultural crops.
Yep.
And then on page 6, line 3, this is really just referencing that the definition of turf has been removed from the definition sections. Section 3, the use and sale of neonicotinoid treated article. See, the substances of this is almost, it is exactly what you looked at earlier this morning. So there's no change in that. I will review that. In section 4, the substance of the outdoor application of Neonex does have a change. It's on page 9, line 19. That reference to turf that Senator Collmore had identified earlier this morning, so that was removed. And then you go to the page 12.
What's that yellow and or plain?
So it previously Lee said plants or turf. And so you took turf out of the bill, and that's why it's
Sure. Plain.
red, yeah.
Yeah.
On page 12, in the underlying bill is passed the House, there is directive to the agency in what they need to adopt via rule for how to use neonics prior to the effective date of either of the prohibitions. So what BMPs you used prior to 2031 for the use of treated article seed. And I needed to change that date on page 12, line 21. It had been 2029. It should be 2031 because that's the date of the prohibition in your bill on the treated article seeds. So that I had to make a conforming change on page 12. Line 21.
Because the others 20.
Right, it had been 29 as it passed the House, but then you moved it to 2031. And this needs to change to 2031 as well. And then you come to the contingent effective dates, and really the changes here are in reference to Senator Weston's point that you don't want the prohibitions to go into effect if the prohibitions in New York are not in effect. And I had written it kind of backwards this morning. They did not go into effect if they had not been repealed. Well, you've already have the section 8 of this bill, which repeals your provisions, and New York repeals its provisions. What you want in your effective dates is that those prohibitions don't go into effect unless the prohibitions in New York are in effect. And if they haven't been repealed, but are going to be in effect at a future date, that's what that second sentence is on page 15. A New York prohibition for outdoor ornamental plants is not in effect until July 2025. Section 4 shall not take effect until the effective date of that section. So if they postpone again, like they just did, then you don't have to go back in and change the effective date. You just are linked to their effective date for those two prohibitions, and you see the same type of language on page 16 for the prohibition on treated article seed. If they move their effective date again, it will move the effective date for your prohibition as well.
Yeah. Questions? Good.
Ready?
Michael did a good job.
Did a great job, Michael, as always.
I'll move the bill is amended.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion?
I'm gonna vote no because I don't like the dates. I don't think the bees care to wait another 7 years.
Rethink that. The date isn't,
But I'm voting on the state, right? I'm voting on the state.
so we have a motion, to move the bill as amended, Irene's the clerk.
I am, and I just waiting for the paper, so I can go eat lunch, or like the rest of you. Thank
We
you.
have more witnesses after
Eat lunch.
this.
Yeah.
Not really? Okay,
Yeah.
7:06. Senator Campion,
Yes.
Senator Colin Martin,
Yes.
Senator Westman,
Yes.
Senator Stark.
Yes.
I'm gonna be enough. All right.
Thank you, Mike.
Who's doing what?
So I'm gonna, if you don't mind, I'm gonna have the lead in and the format proof because I didn't have time to have that proof. And then I'll pull out the highlighting and send Linda a clean copy. Is that good with you? All right.
Appreciate your past work.
You're welcome.
Sorry that, put our committee through that, we
Sounds
lost
good.
an
Yeah,
hour
but-
this morning.
So.
Tough.